Okay, everyone. Today, we're going to do a chart reading tutorial. And we're going to be using my chart, and I will just tell you about myself, and I will point out to you where all of those various things are happening in my chart. And in doing so, I think you will understand better how to navigate reading your own chart. So let's get into it. I'm going to share my screen. And here I am. So the chart tells the story of our entire life, and that's something that's ongoing, and it's changing over time. And you can see that according to the transits, right? So the transits are telling us where we're at in our relative timeline right now. Whereas the birth chart by itself essentially suggests that if you have a physical body experiencing reality, you also have this spiritual body, which is essentially a moment in time expanded. Isn't that interesting? And so this moment in time determines not only your character and your personality, but everything that you experience in life, the situations you land in, the relationships that you're involved with, the events that take place from day to day, the total picture of what you experience, what you witness, what you feel, what you think, what you encounter, everything that you're aware of is here. So let's talk about what's happening in the life of Emilian. Um, what's a good place to start? Let's start with the rising. I think that people are very familiar with the idea of the big three, the sun, moon, and rising. And I would tell you that while those are important, they're just a small piece of the big picture. And they all build on each other. So let's talk about it. Now, the Taurus rising, Taurus is obviously a fixed earth sign. So you can imagine a mountain or the land. It's something that doesn't move. It's fixed in place and it's earth. So it's material, it's physical, it's tangible. And in my life, although I have moved a lot, and I'll talk about that later, my basic character is very stable. People often tell me that I have a grounding, calming presence, that I'm pretty patient, and I am slow moving. I am more cautious. But more importantly, I sit or I lay down majority of the day. I'm not a person that likes to get up and go and spend a lot of energy. I like to be where I am and be comfy and be there. So I'm not big into exercising. By the way, that doesn't mean that other Taurus rising people are going to be the same, right? This is just the indication I'm giving for now. And I love to be in nature. In fact, there was a period that I lived in the mountains. And by the way, you can notice that I have Jupiter in Capricorn in the ninth house. And that was in Italy when I lived in the mountains. And that was when Saturn was conjoining my Jupiter in the ninth house. And I was surrounded by forests, and I would be pretty much naked, like I would wear minimal clothing, and I would be outside barefoot, and I would rarely take showers, so I was constantly kind of dirty, but dirty from the sense of having a lot of nature all over my body. And I would garden. And when I would go into the garden, sometimes I would wear shoes, but sometimes I would just go barefoot. and I would be pulling weeds, and I like to be there. I like to sit down in the dirt and just feel the dirt. Some people are very much against that, right? But for me, it was very nice. And I'm that way even now, even though currently I'm visiting family and they live in a big city. Um, I live in a small city and I live on the outskirts. And so in my backyard is a giant field, which stretches on quite far. And then behind the field, there's a forest. And next to us is like farms. And so sometimes you hear cows mooing. And you also see tractors, working the land. And so I'm kind of almost in a farming community, not quite, but you can imagine it's more countryside. And so you can already see that from my rising sign alone, I've described a few situations that have been an intricate part of my life. And this continues in other ways. I'm also very set. I'm hard to move in the sense that I have my convictions and I don't at all budge from them. And so I'm very grounded in terms of my place in the world. And for me, astrology, for example, which is a very plain fact how it works. Maybe I'll describe that later, how I got to my conclusions, or because I know how it works, when people introduce different ideas to me, it's impossible to move me. And so I sit there and I listen, but ultimately, I know what's going on. And therefore, I can also be a reliable person that will always give a good answer to the best of my abilities. And I'm also reliable in the sense that I'm not a person to run away. I'm not a person to flee. I sit in one place, and no matter how hard it gets with my partner, with my family, with my life situation, I do not budge. I just sit there and I know that it's gonna be figured out. So I'm not the person, if I get angry, I just get up and go. Exactly on the contrary, the way that I respond to conflict is by planting myself and actually slowing down and becoming completely still, which can be annoying because sometimes, for instance, my boyfriend maybe would want me to leave, but I don't. Right? I just sit there and he feels that he's the one that's being pushed out because he can't handle sitting in place. He has a Cancer rising. So there you see how just with the rising sign, I start to give you a few ideas about basic things that are going on in my life on a few different levels. And of course, the more we go into it, the more we collect. And the reason that I explain my chart to you is because I have the most information about it, so I can easily navigate throughout all of it. Also because I've done tremendous amounts of work with my chart. There was solar return in 2023 where Mercury was cazimi, meaning Mercury was at the heart of the sun. And that is the year that I did my big journaling practice. So it was about 4 or 5, around 6 months, where all day, every day, all I did was journal about the transits to my chart. That is how I understood how astrology works. I amassed well over 2,000 pages, written observations directly about transits to my chart and the events that happened matching those transits. Now, let's talk about some other parts of my chart. Let's start with Mercury. Why not? And it's going to help if you have software that you can remove planets and add them when you want to. That helps you bring your focus into certain parts of the chart while erasing the noise. Sometimes it's nice to have the noise because it takes you to other places. Of course, when you talk about your life, it's the whole picture is not that simple. But anyhow, let's start with Mercury. I just want to make sure I'm not going to get kicked out. So you see I have Mercury and Leo in the fifth house. And the fifth house is the house of entertainment, the house of joy, the house of children, the house of fun. Mercury, of course, is the communicator. Mercury is many things, however. Mercury is also technology. So, what you do on the computer, what you do with your emails, how you reply to people online, what kind of presence you have, how you write, your handwriting, your speech, also your capacity to listen, to understand, to put information together. Right? So Mercury is kind of like the bridge between the inside world and the outside world in terms of being able to make sense of the outside world and also be able to communicate about things in the outside world. Either in relationship, like when you write about things, or when you explain, or when you're in conversation with other people. And Leo, of course, being ruled by the sun, is an extraordinarily energetic and expressive energy. And in certain senses royal, in other senses all-consuming. It just depends on the moment. Because in different moments we experience all levels of the signs. So let's talk about Mercury and Leo in the fifth house. Now, I have always been a convincing speaker, and I love to self-express. It comes very naturally for me. I would say it's one of the things I enjoy most is to talk. And when I talk, well, you can decide for yourself what you see when you listen to me. But I definitely like to be the center of attention. I like for people to listen to me. And I also love to listen to other people. It goes both ways. I love to sing, especially freestyle. And so when I'm comfortable or when I'm in the mood, I will make songs out of anything. And I will also make dancing movements. And I don't mind being kind of silly. I don't mind looking kind of stupid. I will make weird movements and I'm going to use my whole body and I'm going to use my face and my hands. I like to be very lively. And so, kids, I love to be with children, and children love to be with me because I can totally connect with them at their level. I love to laugh and to have fun and to just enjoy, just make up games, make up stories. And on the other hand, because the fifth house is the house of games, I like to play video games. Historically, that has been my thing. I'm a gamer. And I very specifically play League of Legends. And you know that that's a team-based game. So there, perhaps it's time to put in the moon. Because you see, I have a almost exact opposition between the moon in Aquarius in the 11th and Mercury and Leo in the 5th. And one of the things with the game is, for those of you that don't know League of Legends, you always play on a team. The team is 5 players, but also every single game you play with a different team. Um, I don't have friends that I play with, for example. I always play with random strangers. By the way, There's Aquarius and the 11th house, because the 11th house is people that maybe you don't know, more like strangers, people in the greater human apparatus society. And we all have interactions with society when we go to the grocery store and there's someone with their cart in our way, there's like that awkward moment and you stare at them and that's the 11th house. Right when you're at the mall and you're surrounded by a crowd of people and they're all shopping and you don't really have a personal relationship to them, but maybe you see, oh, that person's pretty good looking. That's the 11th house. When you're on the internet and people are posting whatever they're posting and you're observing what everyone is doing, that's the 11th house. And also when you interact in the comments section, you take interest. So what are people writing? That's the 11th house. And so I play games, but I play with different teams. And one of the things that frustrates me with the game lately, and here you're going to see the opposition between the two, is that they don't allow you to speak to the team. Like you can't type in the chat. And I guess that's because it used to be that people were flaming all the time, so there was not really teamwork going on. It's just everyone getting mad at each other. Why are you doing that? And I remember it was pretty toxic. So that was something that used to frustrate me when we were able to chat, is like people were getting out of control. And they were just, I don't know, being mean and they were quitting and they were not being good team players. For me, it's important to be a good team player. There you can also see the moon in Aquarius in the 11th. I like for everyone to get along. For me, it's important in whatever situation I'm in that people are together and that we find a way to work together. But now that I can't communicate with them at all, and I feel like, well, how am I supposed to say, hey, let's play safe in the early game? And I like to, but there's something else you can think about. Early on, when I was like 12 or 13, I didn't want to show my voice to people because I was a kid. And so I thought they wouldn't take me seriously. And so I was kind of embarrassed. But you can see it another way. There's another example. I went to a rainbow family gathering. You probably don't know what that is, but it's like a hippie commune. They go somewhere together for a month out in nature, camping, and they yeah, just have like a brief community. By the way, there already you can see my moon in Aquarius in the 11th, right? Being part of this. And by the way, even though you don't see it unless I so you can see that the moon, for instance, in this case, squares my ascendant in Taurus, right? So here you can see, okay, I'm going camping. I'm living out in nature, but I'm doing it in a community setting. Also, earlier when I told you about Italy, it was the same situation. I lived with people that I don't know, and all the time there will be other people coming. They will be doing ayahuasca ceremonies, they will be doing temazcal, which is like a natural sauna. They would be coming just to play music. The people I was staying with basically had a lot of friends, so there was a constant influx and exchange of people. But this was all happening in a very natural, earthy environment. There was a lot of nature work there, like working with chainsaws, cutting trees, like gardening, like living in a house that is not equipped with all the luxuries, but is rather something very grounding. Because you have to go up the mountain in order to, take care of the water stream in case something gets in the way. And you have to figure out, so why isn't the water coming to the house anymore? And there comes my Mars in Cancer. This has been a common theme for me, actually. Um, Even now, I live in a tiny house with my boyfriend. And because we live in a tiny house, we miss all the amenities. Meaning we have no refrigerator, we have no shower, we have no toilet, we have no running water. Therefore, every single day, we have to go to the water treatment facility, which is called a quella. And at a quella, we dump out our toilet because we have a portable toilet. We dump out our wastewater. So whatever wastewater we've collected by washing our hands or washing the dishes or whatever, and we fill up our water tank. So every single day we have to go for a water mission. And also when I was doing those rainbow gatherings, um, one of my big missions was doing the water missions, and I had to take a wheelbarrow and go over the uneven terrain, um, and get water. That was really annoying, but for me, it was obviously very important. The other thing is, my contribution frequently when it's in terms of household, I like to wash the dishes. It just comes so naturally to me. Um, And here as well, that I'm staying with my family, what comes very naturally for me is to clean up the kitchen, also to cook. To do the dishwasher, I like to load it up, I like to take it out, and I like to wash the dishes and to soap them and to leave them hanging so they can dry. So for me, it's always been like water related activities just come naturally. Also, I like to swim, especially when I was little. I loved going to the beach. I loved going to the beach. But specifically, I like to be a water bender. Maybe you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, so that phrase might be familiar for you. But if you're not familiar, it's like doing water magic. In the case of being in the sea, I just splish splash and I pretend that I'm doing special moves. So I do a lot of wah, 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 you know. But that brings me to Saturn squaring my Mars in Cancer. Now, Mars is also about boys and also about being a man, right? So, men have their machismo, rah, and they try to assert over one another. And I've always been more of a nice boy. I've been more passive, not aggressive. I'm not into sports. I'm not good with sports. So the square there is that part. I had a hard time doing boy activities. I always felt awkward. And also, I'm gay. And even still, when I say that word gay, there's like an element of hesitation, element of shame. It's like it's not fully like I haven't fully landed and accepted because I don't know, back in my days when I was a kid, being gay was not okay. Not in my culture, certainly, and also not in school when I moved to the United States because I emigrated when I was young. I want to get to that part in a moment, by the way. But because I was gay, I was very controlled in my movements. I didn't want people to know. And so I would try to mask by not being flamboyant. Yeah, I would move in such a way as to be more tight. My movements are more tight. And another thing is that I tried many different sports, but in all those sports, I was a failure. I was like the worst. I remember, for instance, I did cross country, which is running, and I would always come in last. There was this other guy. He was also kind of, well, I was chubby at that time. He was very scrawny, but he was kind of like the other big loser. And even still, I was slower than he was. And maybe that wasn't about my physical capacity. Maybe it was just about my shame in terms of feeling emasculated. And the other part with the Mars Saturn squares, I had a lot of troubles with authority, a lot of subversion, a lot of fighting against. I'm reminded of a French teacher. Um, I'm not going to say her name, but it was in middle school. And I would always just make a big stink in her class. And what's interesting, by the way, about Mars and Cancer is that she was pregnant for a good part of it. And so there was very much this energy of her being like a mother figure. And I guess I would make jokes about her pregnancy. I don't remember too much. But she actually kicked me out of the field trip to Chicago. because I was being such a naughty kid, and I was always, and that was the case like all the time at the parent-teacher conferences. My mom would hear that I kind of misbehave, I don't follow the rules, I interrupt in class. Even when I worked in the American workforce, which I did for just 1 year before I figured out I can't do it, I did not follow the rules. I have really had trouble with that. And you can see that because Saturn is the rules. Saturn is the authority figure. Saturn is the boss. So in that case, it's like management. And so when management says you got to do it like this, well, I was Mars squaring Saturn. I would do it a different way. And everyone in the office knew me for that behavior. I'll give you something very plain. I would wear these, and I'm going to bring in my Mercury in the fifth house for this because you're going to see it's relevant. I would wear these shirts, these button downs. At that time in my life, I was pretty involved in being fashionable. Now I don't care too much. Maybe I will again, who knows? And I would have like three buttons down, which anyone can patently say is kind of ridiculous, especially in an office environment. Nevertheless, I would do it no matter that HR told me several times, like, hey, stop that. I would still. For me, was I was always kind of the cause of some kind of scene. And despite that fact where I was kind of misbehaving, there was another part of it where people in the office actually really enjoyed my presence because I was so entertaining. I was always giving them something to laugh about. I was always very engaging. I was always making fun or making jokes or singing or doing something ridiculous. And so people would know me as that ridiculous person. Like they all, amongst each other, my place in the group was the person who's kind of goofy. And so they always say, "Oh, there goes Emo again." I went by Emo at that time because it's the shortened version of my name. And that makes me think again about the opposition between the moon in Aquarius and Mercury in the fifth. One of the things I would do in the office that was hard for management is that what I really enjoyed doing is I would go up to people in the office and I would try to get to know each of them. So I would spend time talking to them, asking about them, joking with them, laughing with them. Was like, let's say there were 70 people in the office. Out of the 70, I would say about 40 of them would frequently hear from me. I would go and kind of poke at them and bother them a little bit. And in school also, like the teachers felt that I was very disruptive because I would always be talking to the students in class. I would always be making fun when we're supposed to be learning. So there you can see the Mercury in Leo very strong together with the moon in Aquarius because Aquarius again is all the people that I'm not necessarily close to. But guess what? In my case, there's Mars in Cancer, making a trine to my moon. Never mind that it's an out of sign trine. The importance is that the orb is low. So there's a connection between them. So while the moon in Aquarius has more, let's say, social relationships, people who are not too close, what's important is that in my situation, the moon is connected with Mars in Cancer. And so my thing is that I want to get close with everyone. I want to know very much about everyone. So that is my primary motive actually is to just get close to people and learn about them. That is what makes my job as an astrologer so interesting because I like to know thousands of people at a very intimate level. And I have no trouble going there straight away. It's natural for me. I have Mars in Cancer. I am an intimate person. I'm a huggy person. I'm reminded that it was very easy for me also in college that even if I didn't know people very well, I would be very open to listening and getting close to them straight away and hugging them and bringing them over to my house, or going to their house or whatever. It's just easy for me to quickly get inside of a group. Now you'll notice that I have also Pluto. in the seventh house in Sagittarius, squaring my moon in Aquarius. And now this happens on millions of levels, but one thing is, I have lived in many different societies. Okay, so again, the moon in Aquarius in the 11th, being in a society, right? But in this case, we're squaring with Pluto and Sag. So I have lived in Bulgaria, in Germany, in Turkey, in Italy, in the United States, in Brazil, in Denmark, in India. Probably I'm forgetting some. So I have learned over my life at least 8 or 9 different languages, all of which I've forgotten because I don't continue to practice. But I have intimations of French. Spanish I can get around with, understand very simple things. Russian, when I hear some of the words make sense to me because my native tongue is Bulgarian. Bulgarian I speak fluently. English I'm best with. Portuguese I used to be very good at. Croatian I learned. Indian, some basic words. With German, I can get around, right? So I constantly had, and you can see that's connected with Mercury as well, right? Because Mercury is the one to speak. And I would move around to different countries throughout my life. And so I got to be a part of many different societies. And therefore, I'm kind of a cultural amalgamation. I don't have a strict national identity. And that's because I've lived in so many places. What's very interesting is if you've heard about progressions, you'll notice that I have Pluto retrograde. And when the number is black in the software, that means the planet is direct motion. So they're moving forward in the normal direction. Whereas Pluto is retrograde because the number is red. So that red number is the indication of retrograde. And in my progressions, when I was 9 years old, Pluto stationed direct. And that is the time when I emigrated to the United States. So here now we can talk about the Moon Pluto square at a very different level. When I emigrated, I left with my mother only. And behind remained my father, my grandparents, my aunts, my cousins, my uncles, my sisters, my friends. So there was an event that basically destroyed my family unit in one day. And that was the emigration to the US, which I'm happy for eventually, because now I have the English language and that society was just better for me. Well, who knows? This is just the way my life has gone after all. And that moment of schism has been very difficult for me to recover from because I became distant from everyone in my family. And so it became hard for me to even establish a sense of familiarity. And I moved around to different families. I moved around to different friend groups. I was always kind of in that motion, creating a zone of safety, creating a friend group, and then leaving it. And I was also a social climber. I had to be. And so when I emigrated and I was in the United States, one of the things that I had to deal with, again, being that the moon is in Aquarius in the 11th house, for me, the relationships to kids at school was very important. My place in the social hierarchy. And my place was low, okay? Because I was the weird kid coming from abroad. At that time, there was tensions between the United States and Eastern Europe. And so there was the commie thing, anti-communist. That is, the kids kind of made fun of me for being a communist, even they have no idea what that is. So I didn't even have anyone to sit with at lunch. Or even the kids that are considered losers didn't want me to sit with them. That was I wouldn't say that I was being bullied outright, because that for me has more of a violent, I was more outcast. And there you can also see Saturn in my 12th. And I continue to be outcast. I mean, I live in Germany, but I don't speak the language. So everywhere I go, I literally I can't get by without my boyfriend's help. He's my translator for everything. Because you know, I also have to register with official documents, and my German will probably never reach that level. And you know, I really suffered from being outcast. I was totally a loner. And then I ended up being a stoner, so I was smoking a lot of weed, and I would isolate myself from people. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was very much keeping to myself. I was very introverted, even though I have this very social kind of energy. I'm kind of a friendly person, but there's Saturn in the 12th complicating that picture. And you know, the Saturn in the 12th is also what made me kind of go on this tremendous spiritual journey of discovering what are the laws of the universe. I'm talking about the cosmic, mythological, intangible laws. So there we start to talk about the 12th house. Jupiter is important in this case because Jupiter is about our beliefs and the things that we're pretty competent in. And you can see I have Jupiter in the ninth house. So for me, knowledge always came very easily. I didn't have to work much in university, for example. I didn't really study. I kind of could just read the text half an hour before an exam, and I was okay. I didn't give a damn about having A's. I ended up graduating with like a 3.3 GPA. I guess that's around a B average. Totally fine for me. What's interesting actually is that it's again about my Mercury in Leo in the fifth house. The way I always got by is with how emphatic I am. I'm not a boring person. And when I talk to people, I'm really engaging. And I think it's hard for them to get away from that light that I exude. And so I don't even need to be the most impressive person in terms of my knowledge or my capacity. I'm not a super scientific mega genius. I'm not a mathematical this or that. I'm not. But I'm very engaging. And when I speak, it's very interesting to listen. Well, I think so. And other people give me that feedback frequently, that they just enjoy talking to me. But what I'm very skilled in, and what I didn't expect from my life, is that I would become an astrologer. And astrology comes extraordinarily naturally to me. I don't have to, there's nothing forced. Like this information belongs to me. Like I've known this information for lifetimes. Like I know exactly how it works. And I feel that I have a very, very special relationship to astrology, very deep. And for me, this craft is my calling, it's my mission, my purpose is to expand it and to bring it to more and more people in the world. But of course, when I'm in a field that has a lot of competitors, which it's not really, it's just other people who also practice. People practice in different ways. I don't agree with the way that most people practice astrology. And when I read what's happening online, I just lose my mind because so much of it is just irksome. For me, it's nonsense, regurgitated crap. And when it's about astrology, I'm very strict because I really want people to get it. Right. So this is where the teacher part of me comes in, and this is where the Jupiter Saturn square also comes in. On one part, that I'm very okay, another part of that is there was a period again when Saturn was transiting my ninth house and conjoining my Jupiter. I was on a big spiritual journey. I was meditating constantly. I was reading all the spiritual books. I was very fixated on enlightenment, very fixated. It was like the only thing that mattered in my life is overcoming the mind. And that is also what brought me to astrology, in fact. It's to understand the fabric of reality. the actual architecture of existence, which is exactly what we're looking at, but we just don't know until we go deep enough into it. The more that we engage with it, the closer we get to that truth. And all the while, I feel that I should bring up my North Node that is exactly square my Jupiter, right? Because they're both at 9 degrees. So I feel that my whole life centers around astrology and centers around philosophy. When I speak with people, it's at a very high level. For instance, I'm visiting my family now. My aunt and I are talking every day, and it's always philosophical. The philosophy of how to raise the kids, the philosophy of how to relate to other people. You ready? Give me another 5 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up. Okay. Well, I guess that's a natural conclusion point. I'll just say a couple more things that, well, I feel I'm destined to give astrology to the world, which that's the reason I have this YouTube. That's the reason I'm making any of these videos. I just want to help you, the listener, have an enlightening experience, have a real connection with the subject matter, have a real understanding of how it works. Because once you do, you have a direct connection to cosmic intelligence. That's a special kind of expansion of consciousness. The feeling of it is extraordinary because suddenly you see the logic behind every moment in life. You understand your existence, but not in the way of philosophizing about it and having ideas about it. You have a direct experience. That's what's very important. That's why I'm so stern when it's about teaching astrology. And I don't like any of the crap that's online. There's also the Jupiter Saturn square. Most people, because I'm a newcomer, I'm a young person, I don't have much experience. Nobody knows about me yet. Nobody gives a damn what I have to say, right? They don't, why should they trust my voice more than anything else? And that's why I make these videos because hopefully over time, people are going to see, well, never mind. There's the square. It's so hard to work with people's beliefs. It's so hard. And also when I hear about religion and people tell me about Christianity or about Abraham Hicks or about their numerology or about the destiny matrix or about human design, there's all this chaos or all these different ways of approaching. And fine, have your ways, but I'm not interested. That is not my perspective, and it won't be, and it can't be. That brings me back to my Taurus rising. I'm fixed. I'm motionless. I will never move away from what I know because I know it, and that's what I have to give. So you do whatever you want, but I won't budge. I'm planted firmly. Okay. So as you can see, the chart is something very dynamic. We kind of just move around. It's the story of your life, and therefore the only way to understand it is to tell the story, to narrate, to find the connection between them. And you can only do that when you engage with your chart meaningfully, um, especially when you start to journal, or at least when you have a space to talk about it, which you can if you join the community, for example, or if you have a direct conversation with me, you're always welcome, and I can help you make sense of your chart. But you don't even need me, you don't need to pay anyone. As long as you work with the transits, which you can see in my other videos, you're going to figure it out by yourself. You don't need to pay anyone. But maybe you feel like you want someone's help. In that case, I'm there. Maybe you feel like you want to study in community. In that case, the community's there for you if you'd like to join and to see how we make sense of charts, because it's fairly simple as long as you know the system, you know how to navigate. Okay, let's end this video here for today. Maybe there's going to be a part two. And I will see you next time.